book lovers, my name is Rebecca and welcome to my channel. Today I am here with a review for The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. Before I begin, I would like to say that I've never done a video review before. I've only ever done written reviews, so I'm not entirely sure how I want to go about this or how awkward I'm going to be. I've got a notebook with my notes in it just so I don't get too lost with what I'm doing. And I'm thinking the way I'm going to do it, and I've been seeing a lot of people do this, is the first half of the video will be the spoiler-free review, and then the second half will be a bit more spoilery and what I thought about what happened in the book. So I'm going to do that. So the first part, you can stick around if you're worried about spoilers and you haven't read this yet, and I will let you know when I start the spoilery part. So The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson is a fantasy novel. There are two protagonists, two point of view protagonists for the most part. There's Kelsey, who is an allomancer with years of experience, and Vin, who is, well, Kelsey is a Mistborn, and so is Vin, who has only recently discovered why she has these powers. She's learning about them. And within this book, Kelsey and his crew, including Vin, decide to try and overthrow the Lord Ruler, who has been ruling for centuries. He's tyrannical, maniacal, and a massive chunk of the population live in slavery. So they decide to try and remove him from the throne. I liked the way the characters interacted with each other. There's the crew that Kelsey puts together. So they had a history with each other, these characters, aside from Vin, and that is clear in the way they're written and the way they interact with each other, and I really loved that. It was also a joy to watch Vin start to open up with these people and become a bit more trusting, a bit more willing to let herself trust. And that was a very satisfying part of the story for me. Speaking of Vin, she was an interesting protagonist. She starts off the story as a 16-year-old, and she has to adapt to the world and her new role in it as she learns about her powers, and she does the things that Kelsey asks her to do as part of the plan, which I'm not going to go into here. I liked watching her develop, grow, mature, learn more about the worlds. I'm always really interested in the younger characters in books that get to experience that growth. Kelsey would have been my favorite character, I think. He was really interesting. He had a very fascinating backstory, which you get to learn in bits and pieces throughout the novel. And it actually, once you finish the novel, you realize that every action he took was informed by what happened to him in the past, and I really liked that consistency. And even though he's an adult, I believe he was about 38 years old throughout the story, and he's pretty much aware of a lot of what is going on in the world, he's still able to learn from Vin and adapt his own way of thinking thanks to things that Vin does and says, and I really liked that. You know, nobody really stops learning as they get older just because they're more mature. Because they've seen more doesn't mean that they've seen everything and that they know everything. The magic system in the world is very interesting. You've got two schools of magic, basically. You've got allomancy and you've got furukami, and they both rely on metals to work. I won't go into too much detail here because it's just so much fun to read about how it works in the story, but I thought it was really well described, well explained, but there's still enough mystery sprinkled in there that continuing with the series is something that I want to do to learn more about the magic and what people might not actually know about it. The world, I think, has been very well built. You get to learn quite a bit about the central dominance, which is the area there. It's primarily set in a city called Luthadel, which is like a big city in the center, and then there's like little cities sprinkled around it. Which is part of the central dominance, and there are the northern dominance, eastern, western, southern, etc. And you get to learn about why the world is the way it is, what it might have been before, before the Lord Ruler and all that stuff, and it was just really well described and not in a info dumpy kind of way. It wasn't boring or overwhelming. I think we learned what we needed to know at the time, moved on, got to learn something else, moved on, and so on and so forth. So all in all, I really loved this book. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. I didn't find many things I had issues with, but if there's anything, I'll let you know in the spoiler section, if I think of anything. And I would really recommend this to fans of fantasy, fans of very detailed fantasy. So that is the end of the spoiler-free section. Now we're moving into spoilery territory, so if you don't want to be spoiled, I suggest you click out. Thank you for joining me so far, though, and I will hopefully see you next time. So, I made notes. I'm trialing a new highlighting system for them, and I'm just going to go through a few of them and tell you what I thought. So, there's Vin. She's very distrustful. Part of the reason is because she was abused so much as a child. So I will say that if physical abuse towards a child and towards a girl is something that you have a hard time reading, you might have some trouble with some of the scenes in this book, but it's not overly prevalent. It's mostly through recollection of Vin. I think there were some physical moments within the story at the beginning, but for the most part she's remembering her brother abusing her, and he was always telling her that he was going to abandon her and leave her and not to trust him and not to trust anybody because everybody's going to leave. So that did leave Vin as a very distrustful character that really, really takes a while to open up, and even then there's so many deep-seated issues that she can't completely get through, which I think makes total sense. When you've lived that way your entire life, it can be hard to change, especially in a short period of time. And I did like the twist where it turns out that Reen, Vin's brother, didn't actually abandon her or betray her. He died keeping her existence a secret. He was tortured to death. They were trying to find out where she was, and he would not give her up. And I thought that was a really interesting twist that I think helped Vin open up a little bit when she found out. He was still an abusive butthead, but at least she got to know that he didn't betray her like that, if that makes sense. Then we're moving on to Kelsey, my favorite character. He did end up in he ended up in a cute father-daughter relationship with Vin. His wife was actually killed 2 years previously in his place. They were both caught breaking into the Lord Ruler's palace, I suppose would be the word, and sent to the mines of Hathsin, where they had to mine a very rare metal called atium. And if you didn't find at least one chunk of atium every 7 days, you would be beaten to death, basically. And Kelsey couldn't find one this one particular week, but Mare, his wife, told him that she found 2 and gave it to him. And then it turned out she lied, so she got beaten to death in his place, and that is what caused him to snap, which is what it's called when you develop your powers. Usually you snap at a very traumatic event in your life, and for him it was the death of his wife. He snapped, he killed a bunch of people, and he escaped the pits, which is something nobody has ever done before. So he's very angry. He hates noblemen. He kills them with impunity. He doesn't care what they do, who they are. If they're noble, he considers them as somebody furthering the Lord Ruler's cause, and he will kill them. And this is actually what Vin tries to show him, that not all nobles are that awful. They don't all deserve to die, which I thought was really interesting way for them to interact. And they did end up in this father-daughter relationship, which is made even cuter when he admits to her that his wife Mare actually wanted a daughter, and he thinks that Vin could very easily have been that daughter. Vin reminds him a lot of Mare and what she was like. And I'm a sucker for the father figure in media. I always love the father figure. I love Terry from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Giles from Buffy, Kelsey in this, and there's so many more that I can't think of off the top of my head, but I always end up loving that character. And so it was cool to see that sort of relationship develop in this story, and I think that really helped Vin to open up. But then Kelsey goes and dies and becomes a martyr for the cause of the Scar, which are the name of the slaves, rebelling and overthrowing the Lord Ruler. He dies, he becomes the martyr that fuels the hatred and anger that they feel after he'd spent months making himself known as the survivor of Hathsin and as this mythical figure. And he actually becomes a figurehead of a religion, essentially. And they all believe that he can protect them, so that when he dies for their cause, they believe in the cause and they can actually rise up and take control of their lives. And I really appreciate that. I understand, but why? I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but I've just got why over and over, because I loved Kelsey and I was very upset that he died. Kind of want to slap my best friend, not really, but I thought that was really interesting, and that sets Vin back a little bit as well. She understands why he died, but at the same time, that's just another person that's abandoned her, and it was just a really interesting dynamic to include in that. And she's still very sensitive. I haven't gotten very far into the second book yet, but she's still very sensitive about people leaving and never coming back. And I think that really made an impact. Her brother left her. Her father didn't even know she existed. Her mother killed her sister and tried to kill her. There's just a lot of abandonment issues that Vin suffers through. And Kelsey both alleviates some of that stress from her, but also adds to it at the same time. And I thought that was a very interesting, conflicting dynamic within Vin that was really fun to read. I am an absolute sucker for anything empath related. So I loved Breeze. He's not an empath. He can't sense people's emotions in the strictest sense. He can't tell what they're feeling, you know, aside from basic intuition. But he can soothe the emotions, so ease away emotions he doesn't want them to feel and amplify emotions that he needs them to feel. So there's a scene where they're recruiting for their army, for the rebellion. And he's in a back room. And I actually loved the way this was written. He had different serving girls in the kitchen, and he would ask his men to send out particular serving girls wearing different colors, and that indicated different emotions that he wanted his crew of other soothers to manipulate those emotions. I really loved the way that was written. I thought it was very clever, and I do like that power. But again, like I said, I'm a sucker for empath kind of things, and there's not enough of them in media, I have to say. We've got Marsh, who is Kelsey's brother. They're not very close, but they clearly love each other a lot. And he has, while Kelsey hates all noblemen, Marsh hates the obligators, who are a particular kind of noblemen who basically run the government. And he hates them because, from recollection, their mother was killed by one. And that is when he snapped into his power. He can actually use bronze metal, to sense other allomancers around. And that's one thing I haven't actually mentioned. The way allomancy works is you actually ingest the particular metals and then burn them within yourself to fuel your power. So Marsh can burn bronze to sense other allomancers around. And Mistborns can burn all the metals. They have all the powers. There's actually a quote here that was from early on in the book when Kelsey was explaining it all to Vin. That's the way it works. If you're an allomancer, you either get one skill or you get them all. So a normal allomancer that only has one ability is called a misting, and then the ones that have all of them are called Mistborn. And there are these mists that roll in every single night. And there's a theory within the world that the Mistborn came along with the mists and didn't exist before the mists or before the Lord Ruler. So anyway, Marsh had to become an obligator in order to infiltrate the ministry for Kelsey and his crew, and that was sad enough in and of itself. He had to become the thing that he hated. But he then goes one step further and is actually turned into a Steel Inquisitor. And these guys are super awesome. You see one very early in the book, and I love them so much. They are these, they call them creatures, but they were once Allomancers who have these steel spikes driven through their eyes. And you find out later that there's actually spikes in different parts of the body, but these are the ones that are visible, that are most prominent. And they're driven through their eyes so they can no longer see physically, but it allows them to see allomancy. They can still sort of see around them because they can sense metals, and they can use their powers to then go after any mistings or mistborns that cause trouble for the government. And they're just these really awesome things, and he actually becomes one. But it ends up being good in the long run for the mission they're doing, because he learns how to kill them. They are seen as these immortal beings that age very slowly. They're very hard to beat. And Kelsey manages to kill one, but he does it the hard way. Marsh becomes one, and he learns how to do it. I mean, not the easy way still, but the easier way. So I loved the Steel Inquisitors. They were really eerie, and I feel really bad for Marsh that he had to become one. There are also these creatures. They're called mist wraiths, and they live in the mists, and they go around and they devour dead bodies that they find, human, cattle, dogs, anything really, and they then use the skeletal structure and the musculature to form their own body, which is why some of them walk around and they'll have like a human head and a cow head and a horse head all sitting next to each other on their bodies. And they were really cool. And then it goes one step further, and there are these creatures called the Kandra, which are considered to be older mist wraiths. They've been around a long time, and they've learned how to use their abilities even further. And there is actually one in the book, well, there's a few, I think, but there's one in the book that is on Kelsey's side, in Kelsey's employ, who ingests the body of a nobleman in order to mimic him, so that they can actually have a noble plant, basically, within the system. And then Vin becomes his niece, and she infiltrates the balls and get-togethers and parties and all that in order to find out information and spread false rumors and try and collapse the noble houses so that the city is easier to take when the Scar come to actually do their part in the rebellion. And it was all just very interesting. I really loved that. And I can't wait to see more about the Kandra, because I think they're interesting. There's also the other kind of magic, which is called Furukumi. In Furukumi, metals are used again, but instead of burning them to fuel your body and your powers come from the metal, you actually use your body to empower the metals. So you can store things in it. You can store your strength, but you have to be weak for a while. You can store memories, which is how the Keepers, who are a particular sect kind of from a particular race within the story, can memorize dead religions, dead languages. The Keeper that's in the story knows something like 128 different languages. He wears metal bracelets and earrings, and he can actually draw from them to know the information as if he'd just read it. And I thought that was really cool. And I would love to see more Furukumi, because it's so unique. It doesn't do anything overly intense. You can make yourself stronger and younger and things like that, but it's less in-your-face powerful than Allomancy, so I do find it a lot more interesting, I think. Then there's the Lord Ruler, who was supposed to be the hero of ages, sent to save the world, basically. And you read in italics at the beginning of every chapter from his logbook, and you start wondering, how did this man, very humble, very noble, become the Lord Ruler? How did he go from being such a good person to being somebody who's, enslaved a whole bunch of people and keeps his kingdom ruled under his fist and all of that? And then you find out that he's not the hero of ages that wrote that story. somebody actually killed the hero of ages before he could become the hero and took his place. And that was just a really good plot twist that I was shocked by, and I thought that was really fascinating. I loved the way it was done. It was surprising for Vin, and it was surprising for me at the same time, and I thought that was done really well. The ball scenes where Vin goes to different balls and does her political scheming were really fun to read. It was nice to see Vin, who went from a street urchin to trying to learn how to be a noblewoman and becoming more comfortable in her role as a noblewoman and hiding in plain sight. She took on the role of Valette, and Vin got to hide behind Valette, and Valette was very confident, and she was able to actually move around and do what she had to do without panicking too much, and I really loved that. You know, her face, Valette face, was different to who she actually was, so she didn't, it was like wearing a mask. She could behave the way she needed to behave without being too anxious about it, and I really loved that. Vin is really powerful as well. She picks up Allomancy ridiculously quickly. She can do things that other Mistborn can't do, or other Mistborn that aren't the Lord Ruler can't do. And even Kelsey is very confused by how powerful she is, and I really cannot wait to see why she is as powerful as she is, because she's able to manipulate the mists somehow as well and use them to fuel herself, which is something that Mistborn haven't been able to do as far as they're aware in the story. The Lord Ruler does manage to actually suppress a lot of information in, you know, through banned books and stomping out religions. He's the only religion, the Lord Ruler religion is the only one that exists in this world anymore. That's why the Keepers have stored ancient religions, so that one day they can reintroduce them into the world. So I'm really keen on seeing why she is as powerful as she is. If it has anything to do with her mother killing her sister, maybe. Maybe she was trying to kill them because she knew they were going to be powerful. I don't know. But I'm really keen to continue the series and find out. And yeah, there's lots of stuff that I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to learning more about the magic systems. I'm looking forward to learning more about Vin and her allomancy. I'm looking forward to learning more about the Kandra. So there's plenty that has me hooked in to continue the series. I also liked that Kelsey made sure everyone has a role in his new empire. I really liked that he planned for the eventuality of his death, but didn't tell anyone else. That must have been such a burden to keep, but he managed it because as much as he seemed very self-serving and egotistical, he had this goal. He was going to achieve it no matter what, and I really enjoyed the way he set that up. And I think that's probably enough. This video is already quite long, and I don't know how much I'm going to be editing out. But yes, I give The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson a 5 out of 5. If you guys have read it, let me know in the comments so we can have a discussion. So that'll be a spoilery place for you guys if you haven't read it. If you haven't read it, do you plan on reading it? Have you read any of Brandon Sanderson's other works that you think I should also give a go at some point? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And subscribe if you're interested in seeing more of my videos. I will be back on Monday with my reading vlog, and thank you for watching.